The sky above the alien trade planet was always dark. Black clouds hovered like monsters, and acid rain dripped from the metal roofs. The market smelled like burning oil, blood, and fear. Cages were stacked one over another, filled with weak and shaking creatures. Some begged, some cried, some were already silent. Kale walked through the center path of the market. He wore a hood to hide his human face. This was not a place where humans were welcome. It was a place for monster traders, butchers, smugglers, and killers. And today was also a place where Kale had come to spend his last credits. He didn't come looking for trouble. He didn't come to save anyone. He only came for spare ship parts and some medicine for his broken leg. But something strange pulled him deeper into the darker side of the market. Almost like fate, he passed by weapons stalls, spice dealers, organ sellers. Then he saw the meat corner, and that's where he saw them. Two cages stood in the center of the display. Inside the first cage, a girl with soft gray fur, cat-like ears, and a long tail hugged herself tightly. She looked no older than 18, her bones showing through her skin. Her golden eyes were dull, her lips dry. In the second cage, a smaller girl sat beside her, maybe her younger sister. She had white fur, but it was dirty and patchy. One of her arms had a bruise, and she had a chain locked around her neck. A large alien butcher stood behind the cages. He wore a blood-stained apron and laughed. While holding a cleaver, half price today, he shouted to a passing group. Two tender female cat girls, ready for roast or stew or your favorite. Raw Kale stopped walking. He couldn't take his eyes off them. They looked straight at him, weak but hopeful, and then the older one whispered something through the cage bars. "Please." "I don't want to be eaten," she said, her voice shaking. Kale's chest tightened. He had seen many horrors in the galaxy wars, explosions, betrayals, but this was different. He looked at the butcher, then at the girls. "How much?" Kale asked, keeping his voice low. The butcher raised an eyebrow, then laughed. "For both." "Only 70 credits?" he said. Kale's heart sank. He had exactly 68. 68. Kale said quickly. The butcher frowned. "They are fresh and still alive, no discount." Kale opened his small bag, showing the last of his credits. "This is everything I have," the butcher growled. 68 credits won't even buy you half a girl," he spat behind him. A tall alien wearing armor approached. He had no bag, no credits. He had only a knife. "I'll take them," the armored alien said, licking his lips. "I don't pay, I slice." Kale stepped forward. Standing between the butcher and the armored alien, they're already sold. Kale lied. "He took my credits." The butcher blinked in confusion. The armored alien growled, pulling out his blade. "Then I'll slice you, human." Kale knew he was in danger. He wasn't a fighter. His pistol was old and his leg was weak. But something inside him refused to back away. He looked down at the two girls, both staring at him with wide, scared eyes. He couldn't let them be meat. Suddenly, Kale reached into his boot and pulled out a small memory card. "This is a stolen Empire blueprint," he said to the butcher. "Worth at least 50 credits in the right hands. Add that to my 68. The butcher stared at the card like it was gold. He took it, scanned it with his device reel. "Authentic, dangerous, deal." The butcher growled and unlocked both cages. The armored alien cursed, slamming his knife into a crate and walking away. Kale stepped forward as the girls crawled out slowly. The older one tried to bow, but her knees gave out. Kale caught her before she fell. "What's your name?" I asked softly. She looked up with tears in her eyes. "Saren," she whispered. Kale looked at the smaller one, who clung tightly to Saren's arm. "Luma," she said, barely audible. Kale helped both girls stand. "Come with me," he said. "You're safe now." But deep in the shadows of the market, cameras clicked. Someone had seen the trade. Someone had just marked Kale for death, and in a world where cat girls were sold for meat, a human had just committed the greatest sin. He showed mercy. Asterisk, the dust storm started fast. One moment the sky was cleared. Next moment, everything turned red. Sharp winds howled like angry animals, throwing sand and metal pieces through the air. Kale held Saren and Luma close as they ran down the narrow back alley of the market. Their feet stumbled over broken wires and rusted junk. The sisters could barely walk, but Cale didn't stop. Behind them, alarms began to ring. A siren blared from the market tower, an authorized slave transfer detected. Cale knew what that meant. Someone had reported the sale. Now the syndicate's drones would come. He spotted a half-open cargo container near the edge of the junkyard, with no time to waste. He pushed the two girls inside, then slammed the door. Shut behind him, darkness filled the air, but it was safer than outside. The wind outside screamed, but inside the metal walls. It was quiet except for the sound of breathing. Saren collapsed on the floor. Luma sat in a corner, hugging her knees, her eyes still wide with fear. Cale looked around the flask. Cale looked around the container. It was old and dusty, filled with broken boxes, tangled cables, and one cracked lantern. He flicked the lantern on it, gave a weak orange light, but it was better than nothing. Cale sat down slowly, his injured leg throbbing. He pulled a small med kit from his backpack and handed it to Saren. "You're safe," he said, voice soft. Saren nodded slowly but didn't speak. Luma just stared at the floor. Cale opened his food pouch. There were only 3 protein bars left. Plain, tasteless, but enough to keep someone alive. He tore one in half and gave it to the sisters. Luma hesitated, then took it with shaking hands. Saren whispered, "Thank you, you." "Need water?" Cale asked. Both girls nodded. He gave them his last canteen, watching silently as they drank together. They looked like 2 broken children scared. Hungry, unsure if this was real or another trick, Saren looked up, her eyes now a little brighter. "Why? Did you save us?" she asked. Cale paused. He didn't have a clear answer because no one else was going to. He finally said. Luma spoke for the first time since they left the market. "Are you going to? Sell us again?" Her voice cracked halfway through the question. Cale looked at her, firm and steady. "No," he said. "I'm not like them." Moment of silence passed between them, then Luma slowly crawled over and sat beside Cale. She didn't speak, just leaned her head gently on his shoulder. Cale didn't move, didn't breathe. He didn't expect this kind of trust so soon. Outside, the storm pounded harder. Dust rattled against the container walls like bullets. Cale knew they couldn't stay here long. Syndicate drones had scanners. They'd be looking for heat signatures, voices, movement. Cale turned off the lantern and whispered, "We'll move when the storm dies." But Saren pulled her blanket tighter and said, "They'll follow us, they will," Cale replied. "But I'm not letting them take you." Saren reached up and touched the metal collar on her neck. It was cold, tight, and old. Cale leaned forward to examine it. It wasn't just a collar, it had a blinking red dot on the side. A tracker. His stomach dropped. "You're tagged," he said. Saren froze. "They said if we ran, it would explode," she whispered, her voice full of old fear. Cale gently touched the tracker, examining the wires. "It's just a location beacon," he said after a minute. "No bomb, no shocks, just signals." Saren didn't believe it, but she let him look closer. Cale opened his med kit again, pulling out a small soldering tool. "I can disable it, but it'll hurt a little." Saren hesitated, then nodded. Luma held her sister's hand tightly. Cale counted to 3, then began. The tool hissed as he touched the metal. Sparks flew, and Saren winced in pain, biting her lips to stay quiet. Cale worked fast, cutting the signal wires and shorting the transmitter. Within minutes, the blinking stopped. He removed the collar and threw it to the floor. "It's gone," he said. Saren stared at her neck, her hands shaking. Then she broke into tears, not from the pain, but from relief. Cale sat back. Exhausted. "I'll do Luma's next," he said. "We're not meat anymore." But before he could move, a red light blinked through a hole in the wall. Cale crawled toward it and peeked outside. A drone floated just above the scrapyard searchlights. Scanning, his heart pounded. "We have to move," he said. "Where?" Saren asked, fear rising again. Cale looked at the horizon, where the storm slowly faded into darkness, to the old resistance tunnels. He said, "They won't expect us there." Saren looked at him and whispered, "Why are you risking your life for us?" Cale stood up, opened the container door just a little, and looked back at her. "Because you whispered something at the market that I can't forget," he said. "You said, You didn't want to be eaten. He smiled softly and added, now I want to show you what it means to be free. The tunnel was narrow and damp. It smelled like rust and oil, and the walls were made of old ship metal. Kale led the way with a flickering torch in hand. Behind him, Saren and Luma followed quietly, their bare feet echoing softly. The windstorm had passed, but danger still hunted them. The syndicate's drones were searching, scanning every corner of the wasteland. Kale knew these old tunnels once belonged to rebels, freedom fighters who vanished long ago. Now, they were nothing but forgotten metal bones beneath the junk world. They reached a small chamber with an old power unit and a broken table. Kale locked the hatch behind them and finally let out a tired breath. We'll rest here, he said. Luma dropped to the floor and fell asleep within seconds. Saren stayed quiet, eyes watching Kale, like she was still waiting for a trap. Kale knelt beside his small bag and pulled out water and bandages. Let me check your neck, he said gently. Saren touched the side of her neck where the collar used to be. It's fine, she said, her voice low. But Kale noticed the spot beneath her ear, dark, bruised and glowing faintly blue. That's not normal, Kale said, leaning closer. It wasn't just a tracker. Something else is under your skin. Saren looked away, her eyes full of fear. They put it in me long ago, when I was taken, she whispered. I never knew what it was. Kale took out his scanner, small tool used by smugglers and engineers. He hovered it over the mark on Saren's neck, and the screen blinked red. Bio-integrated chip detected. Kale's face hardened. This isn't a normal slave chip. This one's military, he said. Saren flinched. I'm not a soldier, she said quickly. I swear, please don't send me back. Kale shook his head. I'm not sending you anywhere, he said, but I need to understand what this chip is. He carefully turned her head. The scar around the chip was jagged, almost like it was forced in. Kale used a gentle tool to scan deeper. It wasn't just a tracker, it was a memory vault, a hidden storage unit. Full of stolen data, Saren, Kale said slowly. There are files inside you? Hundreds of them. She looked confused. What kind of files? I don't know yet, but they're encrypted, military level, and worth a fortune. He replied. He sat back, thinking hard. If the syndicate knew she had this inside her, they weren't just trying to capture her, they wanted her dead, which meant saving her wasn't a kind act anymore. It had become a war. Saren looked down at her hands. I didn't ask for any of this, she whispered. I was just a girl in a village. Then they took me, and everything became dark. Kale listened without speaking. Her voice was soft, but her pain was loud. I remember needles, wires, bright lights, and voices saying I was defective. They said I couldn't breed properly, so they'd sell me as food. She touched her neck again, but maybe I was more than just meat to them. Kale's hands tightened into fists. He hated these kinds of stories, too many good lives broken for power and credits. You're not defective, he said firmly. You're proof they're scared of. Something Luma stirred from her sleep. Hearing the last part, she rubbed her eyes and asked, Are they coming again? Kale nodded slowly. Yes, but now we know why. They don't just want you because you're rare. They want what's inside, Saren. Luma crawled closer and held her sister's hand. What are we going to do? She asked Kale. He looked at the screen one last time, seeing the encrypted files blinking. We unlock it, he said. We find the truth, but that means we need help, someone who can decode this chip. Saren's ears twitched slightly. I know one person, she said. Kale raised an eyebrow. He was a guard, she explained. But he used to sneak food to us. Kale hesitated, then nodded. Where is he? Sector 9. Near the fuel silos, she replied. Kale stood up and checked his old pistol. Then that's where we're going. But as he opened the hatch, a faint mechanical beep echoed through the tunnel. Kale stopped, pulling out his scanner. Motion detected. They weren't alone. Get behind the table, he whispered, drawing his weapon. The girls moved fast, hiding low. Kale pressed his back against the wall, waiting. His heart pounded. Every second feeling like an hour. A shadow passed near the doorway, long, thin, and moving too smoothly to be human. Kale's finger hovered over the trigger. The shadow stopped, sniffed the air, then moved away after a long silence. Kale, exhaled. They're tracking us. Even underground, he said. Saren looked down, frightened. Kale turned to her and said,
Whatever they hid inside you, it's
not just data, it's a threat to everything they control. Saren didn't fully understand, but she nodded. Anyway, she wasn't just a girl from a cage anymore. She was something more. And Kale had just chosen to protect the galaxy's most dangerous secret, hidden inside the scar of a broken girl. Asterisk, the wind blew again, hot and dry now, carrying the scent of metal and old fire. Kale climbed out of the tunnel first, his pistol. Ready, eyes scanning the open junk field ahead. It was early morning. The sky still looked like a bruised purple clouds over mountains of scrap. In every direction stood piles of destroyed war machines, burnt-out tanks, broken droids, rusted starfighter wings. This was the Rust Fields, a graveyard of dead wars. And now, it was their only path forward. Kale waved his hand, and Saren and Luma climbed out after him. They stayed low, quiet, hiding behind piles of wreckage. As they moved, every sound a creak, a spark, shifting piece of metal made them freeze. They knew the Syndicate's drones could be anywhere. Watching, waiting, Luma carried Kale's old bag. While Saren clutched a piece of cloth wrapped around her neck, it covered the scar. But she could still feel the strange heat under her skin. Every few minutes it pulsed, like a tiny heartbeat reminding her that she was still being hunted. Kale stopped at the top of a collapsed cargo truck. From there, he could see the fuel towers of Sector 9, far in the distance. That's where we'll find your guard, he said quietly to Saren. She nodded, but her face was pale. I hope he's still alive, she whispered. Suddenly a loud hum cut through the air. Kale spun around and saw it a black drone. Round and sharp like a flying blade, it hovered. Above the junk, scanning red beams across the ground, they ducked behind a broken tank. Barely in time, we've been spotted, Kale hissed. Saren gasped. Luma gripped Kale's arm tightly, then the drone fired a thin bolt of energy. Hit the tank with a loud crack, throwing sparks into the sky. Run, Kale shouted, grabbing Luma's hand and pulling her forward. Saren followed. Jumping over a shattered droid's arm, the drone fired again, missing by inches. Kale turned and fired back. His blast hit the drone's wing, spinning it off course. For a moment they didn't stop running, through a wall of burnt crates. Over a deep pit of wires and pipes they reached a long dead hovercraft and climbed inside. Using it for cover, Kale knelt down, breathing hard. Luma was coughing, and Saren's knees were shaking. We can't stay here, he said. That the drone will call more then. They heard the sound of engines. Not just one, but many. Kale peeked through the cracked window. 4 armed hoverbikes were approaching from the ridge, each carrying a Syndicate soldier. All of them wore black helmets and red visors. Weapons ready. Saren's hands trembled. They'll kill us, she whispered. Kale looked at her and said calmly, Not if we fight back, but how? Luma asked, her voice tiny. Kale opened a panel in the floor of the hovercraft, revealing an old energy cannon. It was rusty, but still looked deadly. I'll draw their fire, Saren. You aim this and fire when I tell you. Saren looked shocked. I've never used a weapon, she said. Kale met her eyes. You've survived worse. He opened the hatch and jumped out, rolling across the dirt. The hoverbike spotted him and turned toward him, blasters fired. Hitting the ground near his feet, Kale sprinted to a wrecked truck, hiding behind it, and shouted, Now, Saren. Right. Inside the craft, Saren gripped the cannon. Her hands shaking, Luma helped steady it, whispering, You can do it. Saren took a deep breath, aimed at the lead bike, and pulled the trigger. Boom. A huge blue blast shot out, slamming into the bike and sending it spinning into the air. The explosion lit the sky, shocking the other riders. Kale used the moment to fire at the second bike. Hitting its front wheel, it crashed into a wall of metal, bursting into flames. The last 2 riders spread out, firing wildly. Saren fired again, but missed. Kale yelled, Keep going! The third bike circled behind the hovercraft, but then Luma jumped out with a metal rod and smashed it into the rider's faceplate. The bike crashed, sparks flying everywhere. Kale's eyes widened. The quiet girl just saved their lives. The last rider turned and tried to flee. Kale took a shot direct hit. The hoverbike exploded midair, then silence. Only smoke and the scent of burnt metal remained. Kale ran back to the hovercraft. Panting, "You did it?" he said to Saren. She was shaking but smiling. Luma hugged her tightly. Kale looked at both of them and said, "You fought back. You didn't freeze. You didn't hide," Saren whispered. "We didn't want to be weak anymore." Kale smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not," he said. "You're warriors now." But as the smoke cleared, Kale saw something. In the sky, a syndicate ship flying high. "Tracking the location of the fallen bikes, more will come," he said. This was just the first wave. Saren looked at the wreckage, then at Kale, then "Let's make sure we're ready next." "Time," she said. Her eyes no longer looked afraid. They looked determined, from caged prey to survivors, from weak to warriors. Their fight had only just begun. The silence after battle was always strange. Smoke still rose from the wrecked hoverbikes, and the wind carried the scent of burned metal and scorched wires. Kale led Saren and Luma through the broken path between twisted machines. He kept looking. Behind them, always ready for more enemies, they didn't talk much. Each step was heavy. Every sound made them flinch. The girls had fought back, but they were still hunted. Still scared, they stopped under the body of a crashed freighter. Its belly ripped open like a metal beast. Kale checked his map, and Saren sat beside Luma, her fingers shaking again. Kale looked at Saren. "There's something I need to check," he said, kneeling in front of her. "Your neck, it's not." "Just a scar," Saren tensed. But she didn't move away. "It glowed during the fight," Kale added. Right when the last shot hit, Saren slowly nodded. "Sometimes it burns when I feel strong emotions," she whispered. Kale carefully used his scanner again. The blue light flickered, then beeped loudly. "Still active," Kale muttered. "This chip inside you, it's not just a tracker." Luma leaned closer, eyes wide. "Is it dangerous?" Kale hesitated, then said, "It's complicated." He pulled a thin wire from his bag and connected the scanner to his tablet. Saren sat still, while Kale worked, his face serious. After a few minutes, the screen showed a strange symbol, a locked file system hidden deep in the chip. Kale's eyes narrowed. These files were copied from a military databank and encrypted tightly. Saren frowned. "I don't remember anything about this." Kale looked at her kindly. "You weren't meant to," he said. "They used you to carry data without telling you. You were just a living storage device to them." Luma gasped. "They used her like a machine." Kale nodded. "But now we can use this against them." He clicked on the first decrypted file. A list appeared, locations of illegal breeding facilities, names of syndicate buyers, payment routes. This was enough to destroy their entire operation. Enough to free hundreds, maybe thousands. Saren stared at the screen, her lips parted. "That was inside me this whole time." Kale nodded. "They feared someone like you would survive. They feared you'd meet someone like me." Tears formed in her eyes, not of sadness, but anger. All those girls, all those cages. She whispered. Kale touched her shoulder. "If we spread this, we'll stop them." But Saren shook her head slowly. "We'll kill anyone who tries," she said. Kale answered calmly. "Then we send it everywhere at once." He opened his satellite relay device, an old and risky tool. If it worked, it could broadcast across 3 systems. If it failed, it might burn out and alert everyone nearby. "I'll do it when we're closer to the edge of the sector," Kale said. "It needs strong signal." Suddenly, the scanner beeped again. Multiple pings, moving fast. Kale looked up sharply. Drones, 4 of them. Closing in, he shut down the screen and stuffed the devices back in his bag. "We have to move now." Saren and Luma stood quickly, ready to run. Kale led them between rusted ships, over jagged cables, dodging fallen towers of scrap. They found a crashed scout vessel and crawled inside. The inside was half buried, dark, and filled with cracked seats. Kale motioned for silence, holding his breath as the drone sounds came closer. The buzz of engines grew, louder red lights sweeping across the junkyard. One beam almost hit Luma's foot, but she didn't move. Saren gripped Kale's arm tightly, her heart pounding. Then silence. The drones passed. Kale waited 5 more minutes before whispering, They're gone for now. They sat quietly inside the wreck. Luma rested her head on Saren's shoulder, eyes tired. Kale stared at the small tablet in his hand. Still showing the locked files. This is bigger than I thought, he said softly. This chip, this memory vault, it's the key to everything. Saren leaned forward, her eyes focused. Let's not run anymore, she said. Kale looked at her. What do you mean? I want to stop hiding, she said, voice strong now. I want to use what they forced into me to bring them down. Luma nodded beside her. They used us, hurt us, threw us away. Kale stared at them both, proud and a little afraid. You understand what that means? He asked. They will come with everything they have. Saren held his gaze. Then let them come, she said. I'm not scared anymore. Kale finally smiled. All right then, he said. We'll make sure the galaxy hears your story. He stood, brushed off his coat, and looked out through the cracked window. The stars were slowly rising above the junk piles. Far away, the fuel towers of Sector 9 glowed like a distant promise. Their enemies had the power, the weapons, the ships, but Kale and the girls now had something more powerful. The truth. And buried inside Saren's scar was the weapon that could set the galaxy on fire. Asterisk, the fuel towers of Sector 9 stood tall like metal giants. Flames danced at their tips, releasing thick smoke into the air. Sparks lit the ground below, where broken roads led to old storage yards and shady bars. Kale, Saren, and Luma walked carefully through the shadows, cloaked in old jackets they found along the way. The streets were loud but dangerous. Aliens of all kinds passed by, smugglers, mercenaries, bounty hunters, and worse. No one made eye contact, and that helped them blend in, but Kale knew they didn't have much time. The chip inside Saren was still sending tiny pulses like a ticking clock. We'll find your guard here, Kale said, looking around. Saren nodded, her eyes scanning the bar signs. He used to work security near the old refinery. She said names Braun. They moved quietly, passing crates marked for syndicate supply. Luma held tightly to Saren's hand, her ears twitching at every sound. Kale spotted a guard checkpoint up ahead, 3 armed patrols, scanning passersby. We go around, he said, leading them down a side alley. The alley stank of waste and chemicals. Walls were covered in graffiti, some messages scratched out, others showing symbols of rebellion. One caught Kale's eye. Read, "They fear the ones who survive." Just ahead, Saren suddenly stopped. That's him, she whispered. Pointing to a tall man in a gray coat, he stood near a metal shack, speaking to a vendor. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. Let me talk first, he said. Kale approached, carefully keeping his hands open. Braun? The man turned slowly, eyes narrowing at Kale. I don't know you, he said, reaching for his belt. Kale raised his hand quickly. I'm with Saren. She said you helped her once. Braun's face changed, surprise, then fear. Saren? The girl from the camps? Kale nodded. She's alive. She needs your help. Braun looked around, then motioned them inside the shack. Once inside, Saren stepped forward slowly. Braun stared at her, guilt filling his face. You survived, he said quietly. Saren nodded. Barely. Braun looked at Kale. What do you need? Kale wasted no time. She's carrying data-dangerous files hidden in a chip inside her neck. Braun blinked. I remember the techs installing something, but we were never told what it was. We unlocked part of it, Kale said. It's enough to bring down their breeding operations. Their meat trade? Their whole network? Braun rubbed his face, thinking, then they'll burn this city looking for you. We're not leaving until the data is uploaded, Saren said firmly. I want every girl they hurt to know it. Wasn't for nothing. Braun stared at her. She looked nothing like the silent girl in the cage he once saw. Boy, she was strong now, burning with purpose. He finally nodded. Hey, there's a rebel terminal beneath the refinery, he said, still. Connected to the old network, Kif. You can reach it. You can blast the data across 5 systems. Kale smiled. Where is it? Braun tossed him a small map key underground. But be careful. They say something still guards the old place as they left Braun's shack. The street had changed, the music was quieter, and too many people had vanished. Kale felt. At first, Ty's watching from rooftops. He whispered, "They've found us," before Seren could respond. A blaster shot hit the wall beside them. Kale grabbed Luma and pushed them behind a cargo unit. More shots followed. Syndicate hunters, dressed in black armor, were closing in. Seren drew her stolen pistol and fired back, hitting one in the leg. Luma screamed as a blast struck the ground near her feet. "Go, go," Kale shouted, leading them through crates and rusted pipes. Smoke bombs exploded around them, turning the air white. Kale fired blindly, his heart pounding. Seren dragged Luma behind her. Every step a fight to survive. They reached an old maintenance tunnel and slammed the door behind them. Kale locked it with a heavy bar, then turned to the girls. "Anyone hurt?" Luma shook her head, eyes wide with fear. Seren was breathing hard. "But not bleeding. We have to move fast," Kale said, checking the map key. "Next stop, the terminal." "Yes." They walked deeper into the tunnel. The air became colder, strange. Sounds echoed through the metal pipes, growls, whispers, something crawling in the dark. Kale kept his weapon ready. "We're not alone down here," he whispered. Suddenly, the walls lit up. Red security sensors activated. A robotic voice echoed, "Intruders detected." Defense protocol initiated. A large metal machine dropped from the ceiling, 8 legs. Glowing eyes, sharp spinning blades. Seren froze. "What is that?" Kale raised his gun. "Trouble." The machine rushed toward them, blades buzzing. Kale fired at its head, sparks flying. Seren grabbed a pipe from the wall and swung it at the bot's leg. It stumbled, giving Kale a chance to shoot again, this time hitting its power core. The bot exploded, throwing dust and parts everywhere. They coughed and stumbled forward. The blast left Kale's arm bleeding, but they were still alive, and now, just a few turns away from the rebel terminal. Seren clutched her chest, the chip inside her burning bright. Kale looked at her and said, "It's time." The final door stood before them, old, rusted, and half buried beneath layers of dust and forgotten metal. It had no lock, no sign, only a faded symbol carved into it, 2 hands breaking chains. Kale stepped forward and pushed it open. Inside was silence, a cold control room with cracked screens and flickering lights. Dust floated in the air like ghosts. At the center sat a single working console. Glowing faint green. "This is it," Braun had told them. "The old rebel terminal, if anything still connects to the galaxy. It's this." Kale helped Seren sit beside the console. She touched her neck softly, the chip inside pulsing again. Luma stood nearby, watching the door with shaking hands on her pistol. Kale opened his bag and pulled out the device that could link her memory chip to the system. "You sure?" asked Seren one last time. She nodded slowly. "I'm not running anymore." He connected the wire and placed the scanner beside her. The console lit up fully for the first time in years. Data detected. "Do you wish to begin upload?" The words appeared on the cracked screen. Kale looked at Seren. She reached out, her finger hovering above the button. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from knowing what this meant. She whispered, "For all of them," then pressed it. The room hummed, and the console came alive. Files flooded the system, images, names, coordinates, video footage of abuse and cruelty. It was proof undeniable, raw, heartbreaking proof of what the syndicate had done. The broadcast began. All across nearby systems, screens lit up with messages, rebel channels, smuggler ships. Civilian outposts all received the files, and slowly the galaxy woke up in breeding camps. Silent girls raised their heads in meat markets. Customers froze as screens showed the truth. In government offices, officials stared in horror as hidden names were exposed. But inside the control room, the danger wasn't over. Luma shouted. Kale. Footsteps echoed behind them, heavy boots. Multiple enemies. Kale rushed to the doorway, peeking out. 6 armed syndicate soldiers were approaching, red lights on their guns. "We need more time," he shouted. Seren gritted her teeth as pain shot through her neck. "The upload's not done." Kale fired the first shot, hitting one soldier in the leg. Luma helped, tossing him a second blaster. But they were outnumbered and trapped. A bullet struck the wall near Seren, sending sparks flying. She screamed but didn't stop. I can feel the chip overheating." She cried. Kale turned, realizing the truth. The chip wasn't built for release. It was made to self-destruct. Saren clutched her chest, eyes wide. "If it burns out before the upload ends, it's all for nothing." Kale rushed to her side. "I'm not letting that happen," he said. He placed his hand on hers, calming her shaking body outside. Another blast shook the room. One soldier had launched a grenade, breaking a hole in the back wall. Loomis screamed and hid behind the console. Kale aimed and took the shooter down, but his left arm was burned. Saren fell to her knees, the pain too strong. "I can't hold it," she cried. Kale knelt beside her, holding her tightly. "Yes, you can," he whispered. "You're stronger than they ever knew." The screen flashed. 95%. 96%. 7%. More soldiers arrived. Kale counted at least 10 now. Too many. Too fast. He held Saren's hand tightly. "You're not meat," he said gently. "You're not a slave. Not a storage chip. Not an experiment. You're a voice," he said. "And they're finally going to hear you." Saren opened her eyes one last time. Glowing faint blue, the chip inside her burned hot. Her veins lit under her skin like starlight. She screamed, not in fear but in defiance. The screen blinked again. 100% upload complete. Then the console exploded in a burst of light. The chip inside Saren overloaded and shattered. She collapsed in Kale's arms, unconscious. But alive, the soldiers suddenly froze. All their helmets lit up with red warnings, messages flooding their systems. News channels reporting rebellion, names of syndicate leaders exposed publicly. Across the galaxy, protests broke out. Rebel forces began attacking meat facilities. Even high-ranking officers began to flee. Kale carried Saren out of the control room as smoke filled the air. Luma followed, coughing and crying. They ran through a broken passageway, escaping just before the place collapsed behind them, 3 days later. Saren opened her eyes in a quiet rebel safe house. Kale was beside her, arm bandaged, but smiling. Luma rushed in and hugged her tight, crying with joy. "You did it," Kale whispered. "You changed everything." Saren looked out the window. The galaxy was still broken, but now it was waking up. And the girl once sold for meat, the girl with a scar on her neck, had become the voice that shook the stars.